Hello and welcome to the Championship Talk podcast. We're back. At least I'm back. Thomas is unfortunately unable to record this week, but should be back next week after the weekend's fixtures. It's been a long time since we last recorded. We stopped short of the playoffs, so I will just crack over the playoffs, then do a rundown of the season. And then there's a few bits that we need to discuss. I think there's more managerial changes than there actually has been transfers. So that's going to be interesting. A whole host of news. We're then going to give our predictions. Thomas has sent me his predictions, so he did do his homework at least. And then we're going to be previewing this weekend's games, which I'm just stunned that I'm even saying that. I can't believe that the new season's already upon us. But I'm actually quite looking forward to it, especially now we've got fans back in the stadium. So, rewind to last season. I know we stopped short of the playoffs, so I just want to go for those of you that weren't interested in the playoffs and didn't see what happened. Brentford secured promotion by beating Swansea 2-0. And it was good to see fans back in the stadium. I think that added something to that game. Obviously, we know we're going to have more fans in the stadiums this weekend coming, so it's going to be amazing. But where that left the table, Norwich secured promotion. They were on 97 points. Watford were second on 91 points. Brentford finished third on 87. So, in all truth, the third best team in the league. On their day, probably could have evenly matched Norwich and Watford, so deserved that those three went up. Swansea were unlucky to finish fourth on 80 points. Barnsley, just phenomenal season they had. Who'd have put money on them finishing fifth on 87 points? And then AFC Bournemouth on 77 points. Just missing out were Reading. They were seventh on 70 points. Cardiff were eighth on 68 points. QPR were on 80. And they went on 68 points. Middlesbrough were on 64 points. They were 10th. Millwall, 62. Luton, 62. Preston on 61. Finished 14th was Stoke on 60. Blackburn Rovers had a great start to last season. Absolutely tailed off just after Christmas. They finished 15th in the end on 57 points. I don't think anyone would have predicted that after the first sort of 10 games of the season. Coventry was 16th on 55. I know a lot of people had them to struggle. So they really did have a good season for what most people predicted. Nottingham Forest 17th. They were the team that last season I actually predicted to go up, so shows you how much I know, on 52 points. Birmingham on 52 points also. Bristol City 19th in the end on 51 points. Absolutely disastrous season because they've got lofty ambitions. They want to be in the playoffs and sniffing around the playoffs. Really kind of wouldn't have put them there. Huddersfield finished 20th on 49 points. Derby finished 21st on 44 points. And then the teams that left our league last season, Wycombe Wanderers on 43 points. Amazing season. I think everyone was rooting for them in the last final games of the season. They didn't die at all. They didn't die off at all. They continued to fight. And I think Thomas summed it up probably just after Christmas time in that they were growing into this league. They were pushing towards... The players were pushing a level that they never had before, and it took them to midway through the season for them to finally be competitive, and they were finished strong in the final part of the season. Rotherham 42 points and Sheffield Wednesday 41 points. So obviously Wycombe, Rotherham and Sheffield Wednesday are going to be playing in League One next season. So top scorers, Ivan Toney. I actually think it was the second season in a row for him. He was top scorer in League One last season. He finished on 30 goals. Adam Armstrong on 28 goals. I think over half of those came in the first 15 games of the season. Certainly that's what it felt like. Timu Puki for Norwich on 26. Kiefer Moore on 20 for Cardiff. Lucas Yao for Reading, 19. Andre Ayew, 16 for Swansea. Buendia, 15 for Norwich. Also on 15 was Danjuma and Dominic Solanke, both for Bournemouth. In terms of assists, Buendia, 15 assists. He was the top assist last season. Michael Elise for Reading. We're going to be talking about him when we get to transfers. He had 12 assists last season. Harvey Elliott for Blackburn, 11 assists. Then Mbeumo, Ivan Toney, Harry Wilson, all on 10, which just shows how important Ivan Toney was for Brentford. Whether they stayed up or not, he was going to play in the Premier League. Let's be perfectly honest. We're going to move on to what was my team of the season. Obviously, Thomas is going to have his team of the season. So this is my team of the season. And again, it's debatable. There were some great players, some great performances, but I had Freddie Woodman in goal. Most clean sheets last season. 45 games played, only 39 goals conceded. I say 21 clean sheets. I think he played, when you look at where Swansea finished, he played a big part of that. Right back, I'd have Max Aarons for Norwich. Phenomenal. Again, a player that, even though Norwich have been promoted, been linked. Jakobsen for Wickham at left back. Scored 4 goals for Wickham. Absolute leader. I know that to pick a defender for a team that went down seems a bit crazy, but phenomenal player for them last season. At centre back, this was tough because there was quite a few. I've gone for the Barnsley pairing of Hellick and Anderson because I thought that both of those, Barnsley were good because they were good defensively and they built from the back. On the right, I'd have Buendia. Centre mid, I'd have Olise, and I'd also have Nick Powell from Stoke because I actually think more for his second half of the season. Up front, Kiefer Moore, Ivan Toney, and then on the right, Danjuma. So again, when you look at Ivan Toney, top in the assist charts, near the top goal scorer. Kiefer Moore for Cardiff, phenomenal, and actually was such a handful, especially when Mick McCarthy took over. I think he likes that style of player. A few stats from last season. So last season, biggest home win was Norwich 7, Huddersfield 0. Most Huddersfield fans won't like me pointing that out. Biggest away win, Preston 0, Brentford 5. High scoring game, Brentford 7, Wickham 2. That was a phenomenal game that was in January. Longest winning run, Norwich went on a 9-game winning run. Longest unbeaten streak was Brentford, 21 games without losing a game. Longest winless run, Derby and Wickham, both 11 games without a win. Longest losing run was Sheffield Wednesday and Wickham, both lost 7 games in a row at one point in the season. So that was a brief summary of last season. For most of you, if you're like me, that seems so long away with the Euros and all the stuff that's gone on, unlocking from lockdown, etc. But I thought it was good to kind of look at last season because last season had some real highlights. It just didn't feel like it because the fans weren't in the stadium. We had everything around COVID and all the disruptions that's caused. And hopefully, touch wood, that we can move into this season with some element of normality, some sensibility, but some normality. Now we've got to look at the teams that are joining the league. So up from the League One playoff final were Blackpool. They beat Lincoln 2-1. They joined Peterborough and Hull. So top of the champions from League One, Hull finished on 89 points. Peterborough finished second on 87. Blackpool actually finished third on 80. So again, they went up through the playoffs. When you look at top goal scorers, Clark Harris for Peterborough scored 31 goals last season. Malik Wilkes, a player that we know from obviously when Hull were in the Championship a couple of seasons ago, he scored 19 goals. Jerry Yates for Blackpool scored 20 goals. Josh McGuinness for Hull scored 17. And when we look at top assists, George Honeyman for Hull scored assisted 13. Joe Ward assisted 13 for Peterborough. Dembele assisted 10 for Peterborough. When you look at who joined us that didn't want to be in this league, so obviously they're the 3 teams that Blackpool, Peterborough and Hull, they wanted to be in this league. This is a reward for them. When you look at the 3 teams that are going to be gutted to be in this league. Bottom of the Premier League was Sheffield United on 23 points. Had an abysmal season. Sacked Chris Wilder. We'll get to the managerial merry-go-round in a minute. West Bromwich Albion, 26 points. Also not really fared much better considering how well they did to get promoted. And Fulham finished 18th on 28 points. Really quite abysmal season for all 3 teams. When you look, they were 9 points off Burnley, who were 17th. So they were the worst 3 teams in the Premier League last season. However, managerial changes. Now, normally Thomas goes on a big rant about every player that goes into youth teams and the women's leagues and all of those transfers. He loves it. I think I'm going to have an even lot bigger task when I'm trying to summarise the managerial changes. So we're going to start Sheffield United. They've appointed Slavica Jukanovic, many of the Championship, Mayfield Sport Championship team. You know him quite well. He's succeeded obviously Chris Wilder. Chris Wilder left his role after 5 years in charge of Sheffield United. Former Fulham boss Jukanovic takes over from interim coach Paul Heckingbottom. Jukanovic was last in charge to El Gharifa in Qatar. So he takes over and he will be leading the Blades into this new season. Steve Cooper left Swansea. That was quite a surprise. However, it would seem to be with the resources he had available at Swansea, he did an amazing job to get them in the playoffs. He certainly did an amazing job to get them in the playoff final. I would say that he's left them to go on to bigger jobs, but we'll wait to see. That certainly wasn't that certainly come out of left field. However, Swansea announced the appointment of Russell Martin, which again is an obscure appointment, as was Steve Cooper for Swansea. So they do have a history of plucking managers from obscure leagues. Russell Martin, for those who don't know, was the manager of MK Dons last season. Now we then get to teams that are playing managerial swapsies. Scott Parker left Bournemouth. Scott Parker was appointed at Bournemouth after leaving Fulham. So obviously gets Fulham relegated and then joins Bournemouth. Seems strange. However, Fulham, he got Fulham promoted. I don't think many people would have put money on that, so it could be interesting. He took charge on February 2019. He took charge of Fulham on February 2019. Obviously got promoted to the Premier League via the playoffs, and Bournemouth have signed him on a 3-year contract, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Fulham then needed a manager, so they appointed Marco Silva on a 3-year contract. Marco Silva obviously was in charge of his previous season. He's been in charge of Premier League clubs. Obviously, he was a Hull City manager, Watford manager, Everton manager, and he took over early July. Barnsley have appointed Marcus Schlopp as new head coach because Vladimir Ismail has joined West Brom. I hope you're keeping up because there will be a test at the end. Marcus Schlopp signed a 3-year contract and become the new Tykes boss. Vladimir Ismail had departed for West Brom earlier in this week. Schlopp previously managed TSV Hartberg, and he managed them since 2018. The club record 7th place finish in the Austrian Bundesliga. That was last season. Vladimir Ismail has then taken charge of West Brom. I would imagine that in 2-3 weeks into the season, we'll be doing a whole list of that again. So, if anyone's as confused as I am, there'll probably be more managerial changes. So I'm kind of trying to work out who's got empty seat, and I'm pretty certain that leaves every club with a manager. We do have a club though that doesn't have many players, and we're going to move on to Derby. Because we're going to move on to Derby basically because there's been a lot of information, there's a lot of news stories revolving around Derby, and obviously they have a high profile manager, etc. So this is kind of going to be the news segment of the Championship. So this is obviously, we've done the season roundup, we've done kind of season preview in terms of managerial changes. This is going to be sort of the news segment. So Derby will remain in the Championship for the 2021-2022 season. This is because the EFL decided not to appeal the Independent Commission's verdict, who arrived at a decision of a £100,000 fine, no points deduction and they'll be required to submit fresh accounts by August the 18th, or face the prospect of further charges in relation to the EFL's profit and sustainability rules. So the EFL decided not to appeal, which meant Derby stay in the Premier League, stay in the Championship for this season. Okay, they've been under quite tight transfer regulations because of the financial impacts of the hand to submit accounts. They've been under, I think it was 2 late stages of buyouts that seem to have fallen through. Obviously, Wayne Rooney has come out publicly, he's been on Sky Sports a couple of times to say they need players because they had a whole host of players released at the end of the contract, and to the end of last season there was a reported delay in payments of wages, etc. However, obviously Wayne Rooney been been the manager of Derby. In the training sessions he's been playing to make up the numbers, and he injured Josh Knight. Went in for a 50-50 challenge and injured Josh Knight in training. Injured the Derby midfielder's ankle, ruling him out for 3 months. Knight is one of only 9 senior players that Derby currently have registered, 2 of which are goalkeepers, so that could be an interesting for their first game of the season. Obviously now only have 8 senior players. Wayne Rooney may be registering himself to play. That was reported on Tuesday the 27th of July, because there's a timeline here because it gets even more interesting. Wayne Rooney then had to apologise to family and the club over online images that surfaced on social media on the record goal scorer appearing to show former Manchester United player asleep in a hotel room surrounded by a group of young women. So obviously not the greatest publicity if found to be true, but obviously he's apologised. However, Wayne Rooney very recently is upbeat on the transfer situation and believes Derby should be able to sign some players in the next couple of weeks. Although there is a transfer embargo and they only have now 7 fit outfield players, obviously minus the goalkeepers. He reports that it's likely they will be signing some players before then. Well, obviously now it's as I'm recording this, it's Tuesday and they haven't really signed anyone, so it's going to be they might be put out one of them adverts. You used to see clubs put players needed, come down, register when you turn up. That could be Derby starting the season, which is terrible, absolutely terrible for a club like Derby. And we'll get to the predictions in a minute, but it doesn't bode well for their start. Also, as reported, and this came out yesterday, Matthias Pereira of West Brom has publicly asked for a transfer after falling out with Vladimir Ismail already. Vladimir Ismail made comments on his commitment. Matthias Pereira is upset by the comments made by the West Brom boss Vladimir Ismail, which suggests he was not committed to the Championship or us, and used social media to make his case clear. If you want to go and have a look, he posted a whole diatribe. Vladimir Ismail definitely has the presence of a manager you don't mess with. He definitely got his Barnsley team working extremely hard, and I would imagine that if any player wasn't working hard, he would come down on them fairly briskly. He would definitely call them out, and obviously some players are a little bit more sensitive. So we're going to move on to transfers. This is obviously normally Thomas's baby, but actually there hasn't been that many. There's been a lot of players released. Total circulating funds. Net transfer profit of 5.4 million. Total income, so players sold in the Championship for Championship clubs, 23 million. It isn't a lot. Not when we've looked at previous winters. Even when you look at the winter Christmas window, obviously still a fair way to go. Expenditure, 18 million. And most of that comes on some key players. And I'm going to go through the key players, mainly the ones that had reported fees. Harry Wilson has signed from Liverpool for Fulham for 12 million. So total expenditure 18 million. Fulham went bang for 12 million. That's ours. So it doesn't really leave a lot else. So if you're thinking your club's going to spend a lot of money, no, they're not. QPR have signed Andre Dazelle from Ipswich for just over $1 million. And they've also signed Stefan Johansson from Fulham for about $500,000. Stoke have signed Ben Wilmot from Watford for 1.5 million. So again, when you add all that up, that doesn't leave a lot. There's a lot of free transfers and a lot of players that were released from other clubs and have signed for new clubs. Thomas is going to do a whole list. You'll be bored when he does it. Players leaving the league, as Michael Olise, I spoke about him in the assists, 8.3 million to Crystal Palace, probably undervalued if I'm being brutally honest. Nathan Collins from Stoke to Burnley for 12 million. So again, when you look at money recouped, 23 million that has come in, and a sizable chunk of that is those 2 players. So I said to Thomas, I was like, well, I'm going to do this podcast. I was like, because it's the start of the season. He's like, I'm ever so sorry, but I do want to have an impact. He sent me an essay. that I'm now going to read out. So apologies if I'm not looking at the camera. I am. It's an essay. So I said to Thomas, I said, who do you think is going to win? Why do you think it's going to do? Why do you think that's going to happen? He gave me his champions, his runners-up, his playoff winners, players to look out for, relegation, and why. And it's good. So I will read. So he thinks champions are going to be West Bromwich Albion due to the style of play of Vladimir Ismail. Utilises. He also is a good signings, Moat and Reach, both not signed for a great deal of money, with Clark coming on loan. He thinks Vladimir Ismail is going to be the biggest reason why West Brom, keeping most of their squad, is going to play a big factor. Runners up, Fulham, obviously new manager. Both of these clubs have new managers. Silver plays good football. Possession-based football. Wilson is obviously an influential signing and proves that he's got the type of experience and plays a style of football that Silva likes. So they're already signing players that fits in with Silva, and also they had a young squad anyway. Playoffs, he thinks Middlesbrough could be a really good shout. Shrewd signings of Amiobi, Ikpeazu, PLTA and Crooks. I agree with him on them. Those signings are really good. I told you he has to get the transfers in. They may have lost Assombalonga and Fletcher. To be honest, both of those didn't play a great deal. But Warnock will solve problems before the window slams shut. Agree with him. He also put dark horses, QPR, having retained players that they drafted in on loan last season, plus Ojibajo and Archer on top of that. I agree with him. QPR have done some good business. Stoke have trimmed their squad significantly. They've got Vrancic from Norwich, good signing, who's a very influential player. A smaller squad could equal a great deal of harmony and maybe consistency, something which they had hindered Stoke under previous seasons. Interesting. Relegation, Derby. How could you not choose Derby? And he put, I'd cover this. So well done. Peterborough, they always struggle at this level. They don't spend a great deal of money when they get promoted. Their stadium is a very unique stadium, and that can be a benefit. However, they do tend to lose influential players if a right offer comes in, so could be interesting. Hull just haven't strengthened at all. The momentum's good from last season, but compared to their competition in the Championship, they haven't stumbled. So Thomas has gone for Derby, Peterborough and Hull, and I kind of, it's not too far. Now, bearing in mind, I did mine before hearing from Thomas. I agree with him. However, I think West Brom are also a really good shout to go up. I think Fulham, but I would have Bournemouth as probably those three are going to run away and probably build up quite a hefty lead. And I think those three will be fighting for the 2 automatic promotion places, and then the winner. As like last season, I think the team that finished third will be so far ahead of the rest of the pack. I think that they will ultimately win the playoffs, probably a canter. Down, I've also got Hull, Derby and Peterborough for the exact same reasons. Teams that you could probably say struggle, maybe Birmingham, but not exactly the greatest last season. Nottingham Forest, if they don't do something significant, I just think those 3 teams are far worse than the rest of the teams around them. So, as I said, we actually have some football on Friday night. Sky Sports, AFC Bournemouth versus West Bromwich Albion. What a game to start off. We know Sky gets to cherry pick these games, which is really good. We're not going to do predictions because it's not really as fun without Thomas. So that's the Friday night game. That's a 7:45 kickoff live from the Liberty Stadium with fans in attendance, and Sky Sports will do all the jazz. You'll probably get all the flash of lightnings and like it because it probably doesn't happen until the last day of the season. Then we've got 3 o'clock kickoffs. We've got Blackburn host Swansea, Bristol City host Blackpool, Cardiff host Barnsley. That's going to be a good game. Derby host Huddersfield. Probably not. Luton host Peterborough. The battle of the 2 smallest grounds. Preston host Hull. Queen's Park Rangers host Millwall. Stoke host Reading. Sheffield United host Birmingham City. On the Sunday, 2 live games on TV. At 1:30, Fulham host Middlesbrough. And then at 4:30, Coventry hosts Nottingham Forest. not entirely sure why that's sort of like in that prime time type spot for football, but it's still going to be a good game, and it's just going to be amazing to see Championship football with fans in the stadium. And again, if any of you can attend a Championship game, I urge you to do it, because there is a worry that lower league football potentially could have a drop off in crowd attendances because of having to produce things like some areas having to produce like negative flow tests, proof for 2 jabs, etc. Do still attend these the football games. If you're passionate about football, it will be worth the effort to stand in a stadium and cheer on your team, because teams need the money. When we go back to what Championship spend was, net spend this time last year, net recouped this time last year was 4 to 5 times more. So these teams need this money. So absolutely. We'll be back next week when we are going to review all the games. Obviously, the detailed analysis that we like to give. As always, if you want to interact with us on Facebook and Twitter at Championship TA1, leave us a review on any kind of podcast service that you use, because that really does help us. Leave us a thumbs up on YouTube, because this whole podcast is on YouTube as well. And we shall speak to you all next week. Hopefully, myself and Thomas. That's goodbye from me.
Bye from him.
Bye, everyone.